Assalamu alaikum and greetings. This incident was narrated to me by my late father and happened sometime in the early 1960s. I would like to give a bit of background about my dad, who was born and bred in Hyderabad, Deccan, and was a medical doctor by profession, having graduated from the Osmania University. He migrated to Karachi, Pakistan, in the late 1960s, and this incident is from his teenage life. He married here in Karachi as a result. I and my siblings were born here and haven't visited India yet. Hence, I welcome any corrections regarding any sort of misunderstandings that I may have regarding Hyderabad, Deccan, or India in general, as I am not a native, and I am sure you all will overlook such misconceptions. My father had a lot of fond memories from his beautiful and historic birthplace of India, and used to tell us many stories from his childhood. Many pleasant, however, a few very strange, of which this one disturbing incident was downright chilling, which used to scare the living daylights out of us. According to my father, Hyderabad, Deccan was not much developed in terms of industrialization in those days, as it is definitely now, and the outskirts of the city were relatively less developed. This experience happened in my father's maternal aunt's house in such a locale. The house had ground plus one floor, and on the ground floor, just adjacent to the exit door, there was a large caged enclosure for chickens adhered to the entire length of the wall, as was customary to have in quite a few houses those days for domestication purposes. The exit from the ground floor led into the spacious courtyard, which led to the outside of the house through the main gate. In the summer, it was common for the family to relax in the courtyard at night after dinner, lying down and resting on charpoys, sort of a light wooden bed, placed at some distance from the main gate. It was one such night when my father and his cousin, aunt's son, had dinner earlier than usual and decided to relax in the courtyard, chatting and playing board games. They got tired after staying up late and decided to sleep outside on a charpoy located some distance from the main entrance of the house, which was clearly visible from the foot end of the charpoy. My dad was really tired and went into deep sleep immediately. His cousin was mildly sleepy and was lost deep in his thoughts, with his eyes half closed. The night was quiet, and there was pin-drop silence. After a while, he heard a slow creaking sound like the metal entrance of the house slowly opening to the inside. It disturbed him a bit, as it was already past midnight, and people those days used to go to sleep early. What he saw next took the wind out of him as he froze and felt chills down his spine. He saw an almost 7 feet tall figure, dressed in black with no head entering the main entrance, slowly in a dragging manner. It was not apparent whether it was a man or woman. It slowly walked past them towards the entrance door of the ground floor, where the chicken enclosure was situated. The poor boy was frozen in his place, unable to utter any sound, frightened at the eerie sight. For a long time, there was no sound from inside, like the entity just disappeared. But after what felt like ages, his cousin again heard the slow, dragging sound of the figure moving and slowly walking back towards the main entrance of the house and exiting the open gate. The boy, now gathering a bit of courage to move, pulled his blanket on his face and started reciting verses from the Holy Scripture. For obvious reasons, he couldn't sleep the entire night and narrated the whole incident to my dad. His cousin was really sick and frightened, so my dad decided to check the passage from where the figure passed by. When my dad came to the chicken enclosure, he was shocked to see all the chickens were dead. Just a heap of chickens with their necks neatly twisted the other way round. This horrifying and surreal sight sent him running through the house, waking all the family members, who had absolutely no idea that the figure even came at night. What really shocked everyone was the fact that not even a single chicken out of many even made any slightest sort of sound, so as to alert anyone. How come all the chickens just sat there quite and still, while the headless specter was killing them one by one? Needless to say, the family members stopped using the courtyard for any sort of recreation or leisure after that. My father had no idea to the day he last narrated this incident what that entity was, where it came from, and whether it had any attachment to the house before or after that incident. The experience is narrated to the best of my ability as I can recall it, and I would like to know what you guys think. A bit of background. I live in an old Victorian house, circa 1875. Obviously, being over a century old, a good many have lived and died here. I would not go as far as to say it's haunted, but we do seem to get quite a few otherworldly visitors, random spirits passing through, the occasional relative stopping by to say hi. But far and away are what I call the WH files, those happenings that leave you scratching your head and feeling very perplexed as to the why and how of it. We seem to get those quite often both in my apartment and the downstairs apartment, and occasionally the basement. WTH files, though very strange and sometimes unnerving, generally are not story length. But I've taken to compiling them because, simply put, someone else might have an explanation, or, if they've had a similar experience, will know it's not just them. Not really a WTH file, but an actual sighting I was having a lie down, one of my guilty pleasures. Not sleeping, just allowing myself to drift within my own thoughts. When that tingling, as if I'd walked through a spider web, started, and the most intense feeling of being stared at engulfed me. My eyes snapped open, and squatted by my bed so that his face was even with mine, was a man. My guess is he was 25 or so years old. He wore a blue fisherman's weave sweater and one of those newsboy caps. He was Caucasian with a ruddy complexion and blondish hair. I don't remember the color of his eyes, except they were kind, and looked a bit confused at seeing me. In a very British accent, he asked me, "May I help you, Mum?" And just that quick was gone. Except for being initially startled by him, I didn't feel threatened or anything bad, but I have wondered if maybe on another plane of existence he was confused at finding me in his bed. I mean, could you imagine? There you are, say stowing stuff under your bed, and as you start to get up, there's someone unknown in your bed. Not sure I would have been as polite as he was. Now for some WTH moments. In the kitchen I have the usual double basin kitchen sink, and one day I found half of a tiny dress shirt, button, sitting on the dividing space. It's the sort one would call a collar button, but only half. I don't own any dress shirts with buttons like that, and I certainly wouldn't have left it on the sink. Perhaps a week later, I was smelling something funky in the kitchen, a kind of cloying, sweet smell. I finally tracked it to the cabinet above the stove. I pulled over my step stool and climbed up, as I can barely reach the lower shelf. Given that, I don't really keep anything in that cabinet, but often used spices on the lowest shelf. On the second shelf, right in the middle, was a puddle of what I can only describe as black goo. It was sticky and reminded me of thick molasses in texture, only I haven't had molasses in years. Important. It was the only thing on that shelf, and the shelf above that is empty. I didn't see any signs of drippage, like from the ceiling, or on the cabinet walls, so not a leak or mold of some kind. Except for this black goo, the unit was clean. Absolutely no idea. The living room, the appearance of a hollow yellow plastic ball for cats, about ping-pong ball size, just showed up one day. The fact that it moves around from room to room, I'm blaming on my cat. And before any of you think, well, there you go. Cat brought it in. Curb is a strictly indoors cat, He's old and has no interest in even going downstairs to sit on the porch with me. A flowery scent like jasmine that lasts only a moment or two. The smell of cherry pipe tobacco. This one lasts longer, sometimes 5 minutes or a bit more, others just a whiff or two. The rearranging of my books. I have a stack of 18 or so books whose covers I designed for various authors, and I keep waffling between displaying them and just shelving them. In the meantime, they just sit in a stack on the end table. Every now and then, the book on top changes. Interestingly enough, books on shelves seem to be left alone. I figure as long as I'm not feeling threatened, the random visits and oddness is okay. Just reminders there's more to life than this life. A month ago, I was riding my bike home after school, and I was in a pretty bad mood because of school stuff. My mind was preoccupied, and I was thinking about random stuff, till at a point, I took a turn, and motorbike came straight at me. It didn't hit me. Instead, it turned at the right time. But me, being a scaredy cat, lost balance and fell off my bike. The person who rode the motorbike stopped and turned around to help me. He was a really sweet person. He helped me up and kind of fixed my bike's chain because of the fall. It was also raining and my jacket had gotten all dirty and messed up. He handed me his coat. After that, he insisted on walking me home because my knee got injured. He also took my bike in hand. I agreed, and we started walking. He introduced himself as Gavin, and he was 19, and I introduced myself. We talked, and I ended up telling him about what was bothering me, and at some points he laughed. Some points he supported me. We were about to reach my street, but I thought it would be wise to let him drop me by my street instead of my house, for reasons like stranger danger and my strict parents. So I let him drop me by my street. Before leaving, he told me, life is like a broken puzzle, which sometimes you need to either stick or tape the torn pieces into a complete one to let the whole puzzle make sense. Believe it or not, that advice made so much sense. We said our goodbyes, and before leaving, he placed a kiss on my forehead. I was touched, and I might have grown to have a slight crush right there. We parted ways, and here's where things didn't make sense. I must have taken 2 steps before I turned around to watch him leave, but he wasn't there. It was as if he disappeared into thin air. I took a turn and tried searching for him, but he wasn't there. He could not have possibly run that fast for him to completely disappear. Even if he did run, I should have heard his footsteps. But he wasn't there. I reached home and sat down on my bed, recalling this whole experience, from the almost crash to me leaving him outside my street. I realized, except for his name, I didn't know anything about him. I did ask him once where he studied, but he seemed almost hesitant to answer until he told me, some college in Amsterdam. The next day, while I was biking to school, I stopped seeing a black coat. I picked it up and the sense of chills ran through me because it was the same coat Gavin handed to me. It had the initials GK on the sleeves. I was scared and didn't believe what was going on because why would Gavin's coat be lying on the middle of the bike path? I left the coat, and I was paranoid the whole day. Later that night, I saw a dream of my dead best friend who passed away 3 years ago. He was there with me, and we were simply talking until I saw his motorbike, which he was sitting on while I was sitting on some rock. The motorbike seemed so familiar, and then it clicked for me. It was Gavin's motorbike. I looked up at my best friend and pointed at the bike with a very paranoid expression. He looked down at the bike and then up at me with a playful smirk. I woke up sweating and panting at that dream. Nothing made sense at that point. This whole experience made me want to believe I was crazy. I tried talking to my friends here, but they said I was going insane. Maybe I am. I don't know if I need help. But when I think about it, The whole experience may have been confusing and extreme, but not once I was feeling scared with Gavin. I just don't know what he was, if he was even real.